That's all right.
You had to go somewhere else to work away from home.
Did other people do that?
Older people,
Other
people. Yeah, the whole community.
No. I mean, you said you had to go away from home. Were there people in the community that moved away to work?
Well, when they got older, they did. I know my older brothers went to Detroit.
Right.
To work. But there's nothing to do except farm.
Right.
This was after World War II, but my daddy had to leave and go to Cleveland to work. He worked in Cleveland. No, he worked for Cadillac Tank Plant in Cleveland, and he worked there until 1959 when CTRW. It took the mountains a little while for that industrial revolution to happen, and we did have it. It's gone now, but we did, beginning with our CTRW. That was the first industry that really came to boom.
And that was back on Greenway?
Yes.
Okay. So, was there a shoe or glove factory?
That building is still there.
Okay.
It's where the pediatrician's office is now.
Well, beside the pediatrician's office. It's that big spread brick building. That was the shoe plant. But yeah, that came later.
The shuttle line came about the same time as IRC. Shuttle line made women's underwear.
Okay.
Primarily for women, didn't it?
Yeah, it was a cut and sew operation. It employed primarily women.
Okay.
Carrie worked there.
But that come a long time after we grew up.
Yeah.
Did you all work in any sawmills?
Well, we had our own. We had our own sawmill. We worked at. Yeah.
Our own sawmill and a grist mill and a thrashing machine.
And a woodworking shop.
And a woodworking shop.
Yeah.
In the spare time.
What powered these things? What powered the sawmill?
You had a power unit, an engine, and you run it with that.
Just a big belt to it or something?
Big belt to it, yeah. And that big belt could flop off and knock everything down within reach.
And my dad got a motor, a big old motor from Mr. Weinberger, Willie Weinberger, and hooked, when that unit started pulling down, that motor went into effect. And I carried slabs from that sawmill sometime. When those two motors went into effect, it put you on the run.
Yeah, Grandpa would, he had the grist mill.
Right.
And they would actually, they had some kind of setup to where you could run a belt from that water wheel to a sawmill.
Gotcha.
Am I not right there?
That's exactly right.
And then I think later they had where they somehow ran it from a car engine, didn't they?
They ran, he had taken a Buick straight eight and just hooked it up to a flat belt and it's all with that. But one of the most unique setups that Mr. Will Weinberger had was a steam valve unit. And the rating on the steam right there at this time was probably, that thing was something like 20 horsepower. But that particular unit, probably the way we rate horsepower now, it'd probably be, more like 500 or something like that. But this unit was real large, probably weighed tons. And it's much like Tweetsie Railroad on wheels.
Right.
And I remember Grant Luckabill told me one time that Mr. William Weinberger got the unit over on Castle Ford, and it had rained so much and got so muddy, and the conditions was terrible to bring it out, and they couldn't bring it out till it got real cold one winter. And the river had frozen so solid that Grant Luckabill took his team of oxen and went down and got that and pulled it out on the ice.
Across the river.
And across the river, actually down the river, not across it, but down the river to get it out. And you know, that's pre-pollution days, before the river, you know, to freeze that solid. But they were some quite unique pieces of equipment back then. And of course, that steam power was remotely used in areas. George would go to certain areas and he would stay with that machine till everybody brought whatever needed to be processed and threshing. And he'd stay there and live away from home for, you know, weeks before they came back home.
So, could I ask Phil a question?
I guess.
So that wasn't a traction engine.
A traction engine.
There probably wasn't many here where
A traction engine was not used as much as this movable steam, and of course a traction engine you'll find more north to where you had, you know, probably maybe 500 acres to 10, and you know, a lot of those are being reproduced and coming back in, you know, for show. But the difficulty in getting the traction engines and the steam back in, you got to have them boiler approved, and for safety, because you know there was a fellow that had done a traction engine, and he was showing it off, and it got the boiler very, very hot, and so he would open up the valves to bring the water in to build more steam, and he had to go downhill slightly and turn uphill, and then when the water rushed in, it exploded this and killed about 5 or 6 people at this event. So, you know, those things were, you know, very powerful, but they had to really be monitored because of the explosion of the steam.
What was the heat source? Was it coal or wood or both?
George said that a lot of times that they'd use anything they could get to throw in.
Right.
He said the fire boy was worked to death.
Right.
I mean, you know, he would keep feeding that thing, just anything throw in. If they'd use coal, and you know, of course, pine knots,
Right.
Stuff like that. You know, rich pine. It built fire quickly,
Right.
and brought the temperatures up quickly.
So the next question, I think we already know the answer to. Did your parents work outside the home? Well, I guess if y'all didn't, then your parents didn't either, but I'll let you answer that question.
Well, the man knew all about the machinery, but I'll tell about the canopy that I brought in last week.
Please tell.
I have some literature about her. Her name was Laura Copenhaver, and she did this for the impoverished people in Virginia and in this community. And she would send out orders to these people, and that's how they made extra money. And from this article, I don't know how I didn't know it before, but she was co-founder of the Lutheran school I went to in Conroe Rock. And she still, of course, she's no longer living, but her organization is still open in Marion, Virginia. And she started out, it was Rosemont.
Okay.
That was the name of it, and my mother sent her orders in. And now it's well, not important, but it's still open in Marion, Virginia. And also, it was her cousin that was a co-founder as well, and he was a Lutheran pastor. And that's how the girls, he was effective in getting the girls, along with the superintendent of the school. A number of girls from this community went to Conrock. I think Shirley Stad went to the boys' school in Conrock.
Townsend, you know, Townsend in Valley Cruises.
A lot of Townsends, yeah. A lot of Townsends.
I think Kathleen Goodman may have went. Is that correct? Kathleen Goodman?
Did Kathleen go?
No, Kathleen didn't.
Did her sister, yeah,
Margaret
Margaret.
did.
Or Margaret did?
Yeah.
And that's where she met her husband, isn't it? Wasn't he from the Conrock area? Irving Hayes, wasn't?
Oh, yeah,
That's
yeah.
what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Clara, how did your family make the decision to send you to Conrock? How did your family make that decision to send you away to a boarding school?
The superintendent of that school came around in this community and he talked to everybody's parents, and I was 11 years old, and they agreed for me to go, and he talked to all the parents who had students that eventually went there, and I learned everything about homemaking that anybody could ever learn at that school.
Is that where you got your musical training as well? Did you learn your music at Conrock?
That's the only way I got my music.
That's what I thought. Yeah. And you had a very, very good music teacher, I've heard.
My first and last teacher was my best. I spent 5 years there, and yeah, that was my main interest, was music.
Clara, what was that like when you went there? I mean, you left your family, those first few nights, what was that like?
I was homesick at first.
Did you?
Yeah, awfully homesick, and it was the longest trip I ever made, and it's not very far.
Was somebody that you knew?
And of course it was a dirt road leading up from, or gravel, I guess, from Damascus to Conrock. And it's paved and a beautiful road goes through there now. And it's been, the Lutherans turned this over to what is now the Blue Ridge Discovery Center. And they have some wonderful programs all outdoors for young, energetic people.
Mom, tell them what your Sundays were like. Tell them about your Sundays.
Oh, the community boys and boys from the boys' school could come up and spend Sunday afternoons at the school. And what I enjoyed most was getting friendly with somebody that had a bicycle. And I would ride their bicycle.
How did you meet Ralph? Did you meet Ralph there?
Barely. He was in the Navy when I was there. And he might have been there the first year. I was in the 7th grade.
Okay.
And then he was off to the Navy. I never knew him until I was a senior.
Okay.
Then he sought her out.
Imagine that.
But when I asked you about Sunday, I'm talking about when you went around with Pastor, what's his name?
Hewitt.
Hewitt.
He was the one that came around the community. We called him Papa Hewitt.
Okay, talk about
Yes,
every other Sunday when you spent the day with him.
Oh my, yes. He would pick me up. Another girl and I alternated Sundays. He picked me up about 8:30 on Sunday morning. The first service was at Redeemer Lutheran Church over in Helton. And then a family would feed us lunch. Then he would have a service in They called it Hall Orchard. I think that's Rugby, just a small community. There about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And then somebody else would feed us supper. After that, he had a service at White Top. And I think he delivered me back to the school at about 8:30 that evening. And I prayed for all these services. And we would pick out the hymns just before the service. We didn't have worship and music.
James started to ask earlier, were there other people from here that you knew who went to Corner Rock at the same time you did?
Oh yeah, a bunch. Cicero's girls. Let me see, there was Louise, Pearl.
Mary Alice. Mary Alice, did she go?
I don't believe Mary Alice went.
Louise?
Yeah,
Louise and Pearl, I remember. And
Ruth
went. And Margaret Reagan. Elsie Morris went when my sister went, Betsy. But I guess that was the year after I left.
How long did this?
And a bunch of deep shot girls.
How long did you stay at the school or the
5.
other girls? How many years?
5,
5 years.
yeah.
Did you come home in the summers?
I did, until the last 2 summers. We could spend the summer and help can the foods. And they had a cannery in the center of Corner Rock. And preachers, Lutheran preachers, especially from South Carolina and around the Charlotte area, would bring their families, spend their vacations there. And some of those wives liked to go to the cannery and help us can. And that would pay our tuition. Our tuition was $35 a year. But we did all the housekeeping. We hired a cook, we had a superintendent, and the teachers came from all around the U.S. I really don't know if they volunteered or if they were asked, but we had teachers from Chicago, from Minneapolis, Indiana, Pennsylvania, and Marion. We had one superintendent from Marion, Virginia. So, and I did not want to leave there. I mean, I used to think I'd like to live there, but
it's a beautiful area.
I'm in God's country now. Probably other things will come to mind, but those are the most important.
Yes, so if at any point in our further discussion you remember something from Corner Rock, just chime in and tell us. So let's just go to our next question, which is describe what work was like. A typical day or season. Let's say, what was a typical summer day like?
You got up early and whatever was to do, you did it, and then you didn't stop at 6 o'clock, or well, you stopped when it got dark.
What does early mean?
7 o'clock. Well, yeah, sometimes you get up at 4 and you'd start work, but usually there was cows to take care of and stuff, cattle, and then you got to work. And even when it was bad weather at home, we were lucky, we had a mill we could work in, or the woodworking shop, or something else. So there was something to do all the time at home.
So you were lucky?
We didn't think so.
We were out in the fields with a hoe, until those 3 hoeings were finished.
Yeah.
Yeah, everything had to be hoed 3 times, irregardless.
I heard that today too from the folks at St. Mark's.
Whether it needed it or not, you had to hoe it. And I'm sure more damage was done than good was done from the last hoeing anyway.
Sean, did you have any, you didn't have no fertilizer then, did you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You had fertilizer?
Yeah.
So you'd have to went on back further
Yeah, yeah.
not to have fertilizer.
But your distributor was your hand.
Yep.
Fertilizer in 200-pound bags or 100-pound bags?
200-pound bags for a long time. And then they got to be 100-pound. And then in recent years, of course, 50, and now I think it's 40 pounds, a lot of them. And 40 pounds is as heavy as 100 pounds.
You talked about horsepower. We had horsepower.
Right.
We had Prince and Jim. We had Maud. We had Lady. And probably about 1967, we got a tractor. We went all the way to Clarksville, Tennessee. I rode all the way in the back of the truck, there and back. We got a tractor. Of course, you couldn't use it anymore.
It's pretty good.
Well, it was everything that was steep. You put apple trees on.
Right.
You could hay a little bit. Anything else you plowed with the horse, and you put beans, you put cabbage, whatever. I mean, good grief. I don't know how they did it.
Right. So what? I think it was Mike. I was over there helping y'all prune, and at some point I was talking to him about that. You know, the horse that was used. There was a farm sled. Is that right? Like
yeah.
So it wasn't even a wagon. It was just something the horse pulled.
We had a wagon, but
Right.
we had a sled. Yeah, I remember going and getting together in rocks with
Right.
Daddy on the sled, and even in the wagon. I mean, using the wagon a whole lot. I mean, that was the best.
You could get on steeper ground with a sled
Yeah.
than you could with a wagon.
Okay.
We'd haul out apples behind my house where the pine trees are. That
Right.
was all apple trees.
Right.
And we would haul those apples out with a sled. We'd carry them to the apple house. We'd pour them in bins. And potatoes the same way. We pour potatoes in bins. We had a potato grater that you
Big long
cranked,
machine.
and it sized them, and all that dust came right up. And of course, Daddy had emphysema. Probably a lot of
Oh, grater, not grater.
grater.
I was thinking like.
They weren't cooking them.
I was thinking like hash browns or something.
You know, I remember the grader at Goodnights,
Yeah.
that grader tank, but that was a longer thing.
The one we had was probably as long as from here to Michelle, at least.
Yeah.
But it had places on it that different sizes of potatoes would fall out of. You put sacks on those places.
Kathy, that's where we sold the apples, and a lot of it was the people around, but a lot of them we dumped out. There's a lot of seedlings that, there's trees all around them, they just get bad and you just have to haul them off.
Well, Daddy was a truck farmer too, so a lot of them went off the mountain.
Okay.
But that was much.
But he would go and come home in the same day.
After our memory, he would have. I don't know in the early days if he
When we
did.
were young, we'd go with him. We'd get up about 3 in the morning, we'd stop at Granite Falls at City Barbecue and drop off cabbage there. And on the way back through, we'd come back and eat.
Yeah, you there?
And if you could find your hamburger on that bun.
Just like it had me, did it?
Well, it probably did, but that was pretty neat going to, going off the mountain.
Smithy Burger didn't have no meat.
No, and they still don't know.
Small amount. Small amount.
Okay.
You see, you had a lot of work before you got out to the field.
Right. Tell us about that.
Getting ready for it, because you had to get those horses, harness them, hook them to the sled or the wagon or whatever you needed to go out there. And then at lunchtime, you come back, you had to take care of them and feed them, and then the same thing in the afternoon. So you spend a lot of time getting ready and taking care of the animals
Right.
once you spent the day in the field working.
Yeah, I mean, and that's so foreign to, you know, my way of thinking about work. Partly, you know, a tractor doesn't need rest. It needs fuel, oil, and cooling. You know, animals, they have to rest. They have to be fed. You can't work them only so hard, and otherwise you're going to abuse them and you won't be able to use them. So that really creates, like you said, a different rhythm to your work where you have to take care of the animals.
Well, you can work them to where you think you've worked them to death. I had the team run away with me after I worked them to death.
They're trying to get away from you?
But that's right over here at Leroy.
My brother said that my dad always tell him to rest the horse. He said, didn't worry about him, just rest the horse.
Did you go get them, or did they come back on their own?
No. They was, my dad's working at the parsonage after the old parsonage burned. And I was disking with the team. I had a young horse and an older one. And that young horse had never been ridden. So I had him wore down. They was just dragging. I thought, you know, that it would be a good time to ride that young one. And when I tried to get on him, my hat fell off. And I just stepped over to get my hat, and that young horse took off. And what made me so mad, the old one took off with me. And I met my dad about halfway from where the parsonage was coming to me and see what happened to me. No, they went home to the farm.
So they went home.
Left me in the field. They could I'd have worked them some more if I'd
So once you had them hitched up, what was it like if they were in front of a plow, for example?
I'm sorry.
Once you had them hitched up, what was it like when they were in front of a plow, for example, the horses?
What'd you have to do?
When
you were plowing with the horses, describe that.
Oh, the plow, well, we had two kinds of plows. A bottom plow that you could just go around the field. And then we had the turn plow that on the hillside. And when you get to the end, you'd kick the lever with your foot, flip that plow over, and then go back the same way. And that turn plow would wear you out. But the biggest problem in plowing, you'd have the lines, you know, over your shoulder back. And if you hit a rock, the handles, you'd be holding the handles. If you hit a rock, then that plow would jump up. And if the horses didn't stop, you'd be in trouble. But you could spend about as much time pulling that plow backwards as the horses did forward to get it out.
Not many fields around here doesn't have a lot of rock.
Right.
They do grow here, yeah.
My dad had a mule, and his name was Jim. And he always used to fly out for Tobacco Road, you know, the boss of it. And that mule was good. He hardly ever stepped on a plant. And one day he was a plowing, and he told G and Hall, you know, G and Hall, he told him to go one direction, and the mule didn't go, and he said, "Oh, you're right." The mule was right, it went right. We aggravated him all the time. Yeah.
It was amazing though, a good horse. They got used to what was going on, and they were smarter lots of times than people.
Yeah, they were.
But with that hillside plow, you could, I know I plowed for a week, and this man didn't want he just wanted it plowed and wanted to plant his corn without harrowing it or disking it. But he didn't want any dog beds in it. And what creates a dog bed, if your plow jumps out of the ground, and then you keep going, when you come back with the fur in the next round, there's a hard place there. And that's where you spend a lot of time pulling the plow backwards.
Okay.
To prevent those dog beds.
John, you can answer.
Sure. You don't need to ask my permission to answer.
Well, I'm just sitting here, all the things we've talked about the whole time, it's like families that have sons and capable men. What would happen to a woman that had daughters if her husband died and they couldn't work like that? How would they live?
A lot of the daughters did work out in the field.
Yeah. But like a widowed woman, that how would they maintain?
The people in the community helped.
Yeah.
Back then, when we were growing up, your neighbor was the whole community. And if anybody had any problems, sickness, or if a barn burned or something like that, the neighbors went in and helped them build it back.
We had tomatoes, I remember.
That's
one
old
year.
timey insurance.
Go ahead, Jim.
And there was gonna be a freeze, and it was on a Sunday, and you know, people didn't work on Sundays then, and the whole community came in and picked green ones and ripe ones certainly and got them in.
You get them up.
And that was, well, I think that a couple of times, but once in.
Because we lost them all.
Yeah.
I know, talking about, you know, the sons doing most of the outside work and all. My Aunt Lola used to talk about when the brothers got drafted. And she said, Daddy put out all these crops thinking that he'd be able to keep George at home because of having the crops. And see, Dad had older brothers. That family was real spread out because there was 13 of them. So Dad had 2 older brothers that didn't get drafted, but they had families of their own. And then Howard and Monroe and Arlie and Dad all got drafted. And it left Martha and Lola at home because all the older sisters were out and married too. And Lola said that Martha immediately went to Detroit to work. And it left her, it left Lola there to have to pick up the slack and help Grandpa with all of the crops that he had. Well, he had to put them out. I mean, that was his living. That was his, and that's how he took care of his family. But yeah, the women did work too.
Our mother worked just as much as Daddy did.
yeah.
I mean, she didn't plow or cultivate, although I'm sure she would have, but I mean.
But I remember growing up, I mean, Mom worked just as hard in the garden as she did canning and putting stuff up, and she worked, she milked the cow twice a day, you know, it
And I
was.
remember that too, but I've never seen a woman like plowing like that.
Yeah.
Or in a sawmill.
You should have seen me in Nancy Coleman.
I don't have that.
We lost a few hills of tobacco. Maybe part of the road.
I guess if you was rich enough, you know, they hired some people to work or come do chores, but how much was it at that time? How much? 10 cents an hour or so much cents a day?
Well, it would have been very, very little, and I don't know, you know, in our immediate community here, and of course I was raised right around the road a short ways, you didn't have that type of thing.
Yeah.
But in Boone, I'm sure you had, you know, families that hard to help, you know, if they needed it. But it was, and I know that was after I got out of the service, that I worked at in Boone at Culver's service station 7 days a week, from 5 o'clock in the afternoon to 1 o'clock in the morning, and my pay was 25 cents. I mean $25 a week. And that's when you jumped out and checked the oil, cleaned the windshield, checked the tires, and pumped the gas.
It's amazing what World War II did to this section, because most of the people that were old enough, you know, to be drafted were.
Right.
and in physical condition. And that left a difference, in the workforce. And a lot of women did work, and they fell into that, when the war was over.
Right.
The men came back, of course, but they were more interested in going to work, and a lot of them moved away from here and started working.
And when you came back from the war, did you go back to your farm?
I didn't go to that war.
Yeah,
He worked at Culver's.
When I came back, I entered ASTC. But yes, I worked on the farm, stayed at home, and went to ASTC.
okay.
So the summers, I was working on the farm.
Well, a lot of men didn't
Didn't come back.
come back or didn't ever work back on the farm.
Well, when they came back, it was a different life for them.
It was. I know Dad tried. He tried to farm and tried to make it here.
But you couldn't make
And
it
he couldn't
farm.
do it. And that's why he ended up in Cleveland. And Mom would never agree to move to Cleveland permanently. She'd go spend the summers there. But of course, Ben and Joe are older than me, and when they became school age, she was not having her kids
Did your mom stay
schooled in
here?
Cleveland. She stayed here. We'd go, I spent 3 summers in Cleveland.
Yeah.
Ben and Joe spent lots of summers in Cleveland. But she would not spend the school year up there because she did not want her children in school in Cleveland, Ohio. So we stayed with my grandparents. And Dad built a house, he built the house here in 1959, and he started work at IRC in 60.
I had on
Yeah.
I've got a question, kind of pre-World War II. And Kathy's dad was in the CCC, and a lot of her uncles were down in Cherokee in that area. And I guess the question is, were there people going into the CCC from Watauga County? Or do you know?
Yeah.
I think Ralph was
Okay.
Yeah.
before he went.
Where's Barbara? Barbara's dad was in the CC.
He couldn't pass the, I don't know if it's his eyesight or what, but he didn't pass the draft to go in or pass the requirements to go into service, so, he joined the CCC.
And same thing with my Uncle John, something didn't work out for him
Well,
to
because
be in
it
the
kind of
service, and he
ended
went in
when
the
World War II
CCC.
started, but it was kind of after the Depression, and it saved a lot of the mountain farms. Because Kathy's dad, I remember talking to him about it, and they would give him so much, like $5 a month, and send $15 a month home to the parents, and that kept the farms going. And
Appalachian High School in Boone was built on the CC program.
What is it?
The old Appalachian, over there on the college campus.
The old hospital.
Old hospital, yeah.
Is Cove Creek School?
No.
Probably.
Downtown Post Office.
If it's rock building and changes our, it was CCC.
Post office.
Fort John, is that WPA?
WPA.
The mural,
We pedaled that.
Let's not build too much.
So what work did you enjoy? You particularly enjoy, and why?
Laying that corn by.
And when they said it was dinner time.
Dinner
Speaking of which, dinner was your noontime meal, wasn't it?
Noontime meal.
And it was a big meal.
Yeah.
And then supper was a lesser meal, probably the leftovers
Lesser
from
meal, that was
dinner.
a pretty
Yeah.
good meal.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's leisure.
And my mother would work out in the field, and she would come back to the house in time to fix dinner,
Yeah,
and then go back out in the field.
yeah.
Or we carry a can of Spam to the cabbage patch. That's what we'd have for lunch and go away.
Drink Kool-Aid, Jay?
No, we never drunk Kool-Aid. Water or milk, I don't ever remember Kool-Aid or
Kool-Aid was a luxury. Granny would have Kool-Aid.
Worked it out.
You remember Tang? That was
Yeah, I
long,
remember,
wasn't
but we didn't have, but now, we would hire work hands, or we would have work hands and Mama would cook for them. And when we were picking apples, it'd take us 2 weeks to pick all the apples a lot of times. And, I remember one time, all the people that wasn't family was over 70 years old that was helping us pick apples. And a lot of them were professors from the university. Retired professors from the university.
And they came because of the lunch they got. They would have worked without, most of them did. They just took some apples.
And Pastor Goodman was a pretty good cabbage cutter too.
Cabbage sack holder.
Yeah, well, yeah. And
He stumbled around a lot.
We act like we can't work, but we're just hanging around for the food.
The bear gets there.
Till the bear comes. So what work did you not like? What was your least favorite thing?
John,
Putting up hay was
John
my
Walker's
least
what kind
because
of
you stacked it then. And I was the smallest, and I always had to go up on the stack, you know, and trump it around, and it'd always be the one throwing up that'd cover you up. Didn't differ where you got around that stack, they'd throw it up.
I love that part. Because my granddad was still stacking and shit like that.
Well-
When I was little and I got to do that.
Joe and Reese Burkett used to help us, and I liked for it because Reese he'd cover you up. But Joe would put it right where it needed to be, all you had to do was step on. And so all I did was go around the pole. But when Reese started throwing, why, you'd better look at it.
remember that, John? Remember that picture there, your leisure time?
Yeah.
Tell us if you speak alarm.
The one in front that's driving is John, my brother, and the one that's the engine behind you can't see, that's John Walker.
Now, the stilts, tell us who they are.
That's HC, and go ahead, HC, tell them.
That's coming down here in the leisure.
Okay, so why don't we just go there? How did you spend your free time? Evidently, some people walked on stilts.
Well, that depended on the, in the wintertime, we'd play at night. Checkers was a very popular game. And Fox and Goose and dominoes and things like that. And later, my mother's brother, Uncle Bert Carpenter, was a Lutheran minister. He came up and visited and brought a Monopoly game. And that was the first Monopoly game that we had ever seen. So that took over the checkers pretty good for a while. But that pretty well occupied that. Then in the summertime, I think Leroy was passing stilts around there. So we would stilt occasionally, even get in the creek with them. But, and that's a picture of...
Who is this with you?
That's Bernard.
Okay.
That's a cousin. And we would play all kinds of games. We'd make a makeshift net, play volleyball. We fished a lot of horseshoe. And we didn't have any bicycles to ride. We'd even roll an automobile tires. Occupy some time and get somebody in it and roll them inside the car. And sometimes they'd turn them loose.
Everybody's got that cousin that'll do it.
Did you guys down here ever shoot marbles?
Oh, yeah, we'd shoot marbles. And in elementary school, gosh, I'd wore my thumb out. If you was a really good shooter, you could go home with a pocket full of marbles. But, and one game that we played at home was called Granny Hole. And you had a driveway through the barn so you could make 4 straight holes and then 1 hole over to the right. And it's about like playing, what is it, putt? Not putt.
It goes a lot like
Croquet.
Croquet, yeah.
And same on the same basis, except to use marbles. And you could shoot somebody else's marble away from the hole. But to win the game, you had to go all the way through and back.
And how'd you make the marble holes? with your heel, right?
Yeah,
The heel in your shoe, you spin
yeah,
around.
you,
make-
any way you could, yeah.
Different size marbles?
Huh?
Yeah,
Just
Different
the regular
size
size marbles.
you had
Little
regular
marbles.
marbles and
Pocket.
cabaldi's.
We call them.
Well, a shooting marble, you'd always try to get a one, little larger for a shooting marble. And then you'd draw a circle. Put a bunch of marbles in the center of the circle. It's kind of like, playing poker, not pool. And, you bust that, and you'd keep shooting. If you'd shoot one out of the circle, you'd just keep on. And if you're lucky, you might even shoot them all out. Everybody else getting the turn.
And there's always somebody that had a ball bearing. But they sneak in, be careful.
They were illegal.
Yeah.
You talked about playing checkers. Did you ever have a Chinese checkerboard?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Because
finally got
I
that.
meant to bring, I have the Chinese checkerboard that I grew up playing on at Grandy Louisville's. And I mean, it was Chinese checkers and cards and puzzles. That was all we did. The snow days, when we couldn't be outside and all. And we have passed the love of Chinese checkers on to our kids. They love to try to beat me in Chinese checkers.
One of the big pastimes in this area, not in this community as much, but in the surrounding communities, all of them had baseball teams.
That's what I
Yes.
heard.
And
Yes.
they played, and it was pretty competitive.
Didn't they walk from place
Oh,
to
yeah.
place to go play?
Yeah.
Bill knows a lot about that, because his
Some of
daddy
you may
was
know
involved in
Boyd
that.
Matwood, and Boyd was a tremendous baseball player, but he talked about driving from Sparta over to play at Perkinsville or Bamboo, and they'd have to stop 3 or 4 times and fix their tires. So they went back.
Well, Jack Rocks
Yeah,
played
exactly.
a lot back then
Can
too.
you step on? We played carom, we had a carom board, I do remember that.
Was
That
was any of
was-
you ever over to Ward's there where he built that?
Baseball.
Ben Ward's ball?
Yes.
I think I can see that from where John Bollinger's house is.
I never
I think
had
it's
it.
back over that way.
Yeah, we played softball in college up there.
In what college?
And, we were doing archaeological field school in Ray Ward's field, which is down below. And we went up to Ben's after digging all day, we played softball up
You was doing what over?
there. It was archaeological field school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They were playing softball.
Yeah.
Ben Ward's.
Yeah. And Ben
And you-
Ward's, yeah.
The softball thing continued here into we got together on Sunday afternoons
Right.
for years, like in the 60s and even into the 70s. And
We had
went
church
to-
city here when I
Yeah,
first
but
came.
every Sunday afternoon, you went to Green Valley and played softball.
They did a lot of horseshoe pitching
Yeah.
too on Sunday afternoons here at the church.
Now, we made our own wagons and sleds to sleigh ride.
Okay.
Any basketball, I guess? Have any basketball
No, we
courts
didn't know
or?
what basketball
That was a sissy game.
I talked about, there was some teams that they would go and play and they'd always get in fights. They'd go to Banner Up and they'd get in fights.
Now, did I hear y'all say anything about
frustration.
playing? Did I hear y'all say anything about playing cards growing up?
Yeah.
Okay, now see, that was one thing Grandpa Weinberger did not allow. You did not play cards in his house. There was never a deck of cards in his house.
You know where it first started, Savig, through here?
Where was
A
it?
Lutheran preacher.
Yeah. But Grandpa, he grew up, that was gambling and you didn't play cards.
It
And
didn't
he
differ
did
what
not
kind of cards
allow-
it was.
It did not matter, he did not allow cards in his house. So we never played cards there.
So the Lutheran preacher started the cards or started putting the limits on the card
No,
playing?
he
Rummy.
was big in it. Hoke Ritchie.
Gin rummy, yeah.
And you played rummy and
Rook.
Rook, rummy.
rook, yeah.
I love Rook.
I love rook too. We need to have some rook.
Yeah, rook's fun.
Rook was bad.
We need some marble, we need to play marble.
Well, we don't need them, we need a ball. I can get down.
We'll do a marble up here, Jay.
We played croquet, and our daddy loved croquet so good, of course, he would put up a spotlight, and on Saturday nights and Sunday nights, we would play croquet till you couldn't go, because then Monday, the rest of
We got to clean up on Saturday afternoon and play softball.
Yeah, we did. Got our bath on Saturday afternoon.
And we could play softball.
And all the neighbors would come from, and play ball at our house.
And we'd go down to play in the field beside Tabernacle. It was a cow pasture, but that's where we played.
Or people would come and they'd ride horses, which was the best in the world. We'd go to Grandpa and Grandma's and there'd be people riding horses and ride horses.
You see, you was asking about basketball, but see, when I was growing up, I went to a one-room school that was located where you turn up the Burkett Road.
Gracie Creek.
And so the ball that we played there was softball. That's all we knew. And other games, you'd chase each other around. And I don't remember now, we had a game where you run and hide.
Hide and seek.
Well, hide and seek was one too. But I know they'd give us at lunchtime. Sometimes some of the men in the community would happen to drop by.
Happen to drop by when?
At lunchtime. And they'd get involved in a softball game with us. And we'd get a good softball game going, and the teacher would ring the bell to go back in. We'd not even get to play all afternoon.
Especially on Fridays.
Yeah.
And there's a variation of the softball we played. I don't know if you all played it or not, called town ball. And instead of throwing the ball and somebody hit the ball, you'd catch it. And if you throwed it between that runner and the base, they were out. And they called it town ball. I don't know.
That got sophisticated after I grew up.
Well, you talked about basketball, but Dad played on the basketball team at Todd.
Oh, at Elkland?
Yeah.
Elkland School?
Yeah, and he said that they had a pretty good team, and they were gonna play somebody else, and they thought they needed uniforms. So they bought uniforms for them, and they couldn't play in those uniforms. They got beat back.
Yeah,
Did they have a gym for it, or was it outside?
And I think they had a gym there.
They had an old gym there.
Yeah, no gym, that was in high school.
Yeah.
And that was the only sport they played. Well, they did play baseball.
Yeah.
Baseball and basketball.
The majority of people at that time going to high school went to Todd, Elkland High School down there. And I was the first one in our family that went to Boone High School.
When our cousins would get together at Grandpa and Grandma Coffee's, we'd have snipe hunts. Take them off snipe hunting. Or maybe even at Grandpa and Grandma Crockett's.
Did they bring back a lot of snipes?
Huh?
Did they bring back a lot of snipes?
No. Some of them wanted in a little later.
I went to Boone High School because Virginia only had 11th grade.
Yeah.
So I went back to Boone to get the 12th grade. But I had still graduated from Virginia schools.
When you said 11, when do you think they went to 12, added that 12th grade? You know?
I went to the 12th grade in 48. So that's what you're asking?
About what year did they change and add that other year?
I don't know
when Virginia changed, I don't know.
I don't know when they happened.
Yeah.
I know Mom went 11 years too.
It was, I think it was in the 40s that they changed, I believe.
Well, I graduated in 42 from high school, so they hadn't been after that.
Because they had 12 grades when I was going.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about kind of transition to today's talking about work and leisure, how we experience that today. And I'll tell you a story that kind of sparked part of my imagination for helping plan this whole program. I was over at Cecil Gerganis' house. Actually, Kathy and Eric were there, and we were making cider. And Cecil has an old cider press. It's got a pretty big crank on it, and you got to really get it going to get this thing functional. Bethany was having a grand old time working as hard as she could at it. And I was doing it, and for some reason, it Cecil was by me and I said, you know, you ought to put a motor on this thing. And I just said that because it sounded like a thing to say. I got tired of turning it. And Cecil said, well, I had one on. I took it off. That takes the community out of it. And I thought, well, duh. I mean, that's why everybody was there to enjoy making that sign. And it kind of dawned on me that in former times, work was more communal. And also that there was rest and leisure built into it, probably differently than today's way of understanding work. So let's jump to that quickly. When we talk about work today, what are we talking about? Typically, you say, well, I'm going to work.
That's what you get paid for.
40 hours, right? I mean, so the J word comes up, you have a job, right? Obviously that changed a lot, and you folks talked about that. It didn't all happen overnight, and World War II wasn't an absolute distinction there, but post-World War II, there was more of an employment economy, whereas previously there would have been more of an agrarian and sustaining economy where you produced a lot of what you needed in the home. So when we go to work, what are we doing? Or why are we going to work? Sure, we enjoy it, it's our calling, yes, true. But what else are we doing it for? What do you want money for?
Just buy things. Pay your insurance, pay your taxes.
Pay your taxes.
Go to the doctor.
Go to the doctor.
Buy your food.
Buy your food.
Food, clothing, shelter,
Right.
basic necessities.
Right. That's true. But just recognize the difference there in previous generations. And we can't go back to this, that's not what I'm suggesting, but our work is much more indirect. We work to earn money to buy the things we need, whereas in previous generations, they just worked for the things they needed. All right?
Well, that's not exactly true. There's the farmers trade in
Sure.
and sold things. I worked on a goat farm, and if you ever had weenies with goat milk on it, you want to try and get a cow.
Yeah, it's not absolute. And I'm not suggesting that it's an absolute, that people didn't trade or didn't have money in previous generations, but it is the case that now we are more a consumer economy. That is the distinction. In fact, in America, I think 2/3 of our economy is based on consumer spending. So that is a big shift in the way we produce and secure our livelihoods. I think this creates a lot of leisure time too, because we're not producing what we need. So what do we do with leisure time nowadays?
Television.
Read junk mail, yeah, television. If you're someone like me, a drawed millennial.
Sport.
There you go. Sports. Do we have more downtime? I don't know.
Well, and when you talk about like how hard your work was, it was hard work, but it wasn't what we now call stress.
Yes.
It was work. So you could enjoy treats that you got and you could enjoy downtime. And I don't know, so many times now when we talk about work, we all talk about our stress.
And we talk about the B word, busy.
Well, you worked then, go ahead.
I think the type of work that we did, the family worked together as a unit, and even though we worked hard, we enjoyed working together. And you had that same unity throughout the whole community, and that we don't have now.
Hey, see, tell them about your leisure time, church.
The what?
Church, leisure. Church. When you went to church, your leisure time at church.
Leisure time at church?
Yes. What'd you do?
And that was our social life.
Well, yeah.
Luther League.
Your social life was the Luther League. We look forward to that, participating in it. And then that little one-room schoolhouse was kind of, in addition to the church, was a community center. And we'd have box suppers for a little fundraising, maybe to help the widow that needed help. And that was a big treat from a social standpoint.
Did you, I heard a box supper, you know, where girls would.
Yeah.
Did you do that?
Yeah, the girls would bake a pie or fix something, you know, in the box supper, and the men would buy the boxes, and then they would eat with the girl or woman that fixed it. And they were, usually those box suppers were bid off. So if you had if there's a guy that wanted to eat with a certain girl, and you knew it, that bid kept getting bigger and bigger. He paid pretty dear to eat with him.
Who got the money? Was it at a school or somewhere?
Well, I'd use the fundraisers to help some needy family in the community.
We had one teacher at this little one-room school that would bring boxes, a box of scrap, material scraps, and let the girls sew. And they had all ages, from beginners to 7th graders, I guess. And I don't remember what they did for the guys, for the boys, for their down.
We didn't sew any.
She did. The same teacher also helped us make molasses candy, taffy. And
we only had one teacher. Your dad was a teacher there at one time. I went to him.
You went to my granddad.
Granddad, that's your granddad, yeah.
Yeah. My mother taught down on in the old school, I guess. Before they were, that's how she and my dad met.
Claire, talking about the teacher teaching you to sew and all. Our 6th grade teacher at Green Valley, best thing that ever happened. Our 6th grade teacher at Green Valley taught everybody, boys and girls, to knit. Now the boys, she didn't force the ones that didn't want to, but there were several boys that did. Sam, remember Sam?
And J.O., he's still
J.O., yeah. And she taught us to knit.
What's her name?
Miss Green, Miss Florence Green, she's gone now, but she taught us to knit in 6th grade.
She must have picked that up after I went through them.
Did she may have?
We
didn't do it when.
We didn't do any knitting.
We sure did.
I had the nicest green yarn, and we traveled out so many times.
Yeah, she did.
And that school, that elementary school, was called Riverview.
The one.
And I know a lot of people wondered, you know, how it got that name. And the first school was in that turn close where I live there, that sharp turn. It was up there, and you could see the river from it there. And that's how
Are
it
there
got
any
the name.
pictures of that on the school anywhere?
Yes.
Are there?
Yes, only a side view.
Really?
I've got one, it's taken in 1917 with all the students, and I think they're all dressed up, so I don't think they had that many students. I think they just want to come get your picture taken.
It was still standing until, what, in the 70s?
No, not the one.
I'm not talking about the old Riverview, I'm talking about the one at the end of my road.
Oh,
That one was standing until,
yeah. And there's some photographs of that around.
Is there?
You should, it's Carrie and Clayton.
Yeah.
And I don't know, was that?
That is my mom, yeah.
That
And that was at the school, wasn't it?
That was at that school.
Yeah.
See, Clayton was a ladies' man.
Talked about moving the machine across the river. The store out at Bethelview, or Maple Forks now, the old store was the old church. And it was where the other church is, but before it was that, it was out on kind of hollow, what we call it, Hard Road, and they moved it. But I remember them telling us about using the horse, and they used rollers, and they took it from where it was now down to, from where Bethelview is now, is to right down to the foot of the hill. And I'd say that's how they moved it the whole way, using the horse, pulling it,
Putting logs
under it, and rolling the whole thing. But if you ever notice that, you can tell it was church.
Yeah.
You talking about the one that's there at Arley's?
One other comment about the work and leisure aspect. My granny, Lookaville, and my Aunt Mary were avid quilters. They made beautiful quilts. And they would invite people, people would come in and quilt together. And they would have folks come in to quilt and visit. And my granny was so meticulous with her stitches that if what the people who had come in to visit didn't suit her, she would rip it out and do it over. But it was worth it just to have the company to come in and visit.
Did they know that?
Of course not, they wouldn't have come back.
Come back and go, y'all get mad.
Don't give them thread for that.
Yeah. This is invisible.
That's right.
Well, on that note too, because forever we've been coming down here in the summer to visit my grandparents, Norris, and we'd be sitting on the front porch, and it's always during canning season, always. So you're shelling beans or you're stringing and snapping beans. And I remember we'd be sitting on the porch, and somebody would drive up just to visit for a little bit, pick up their can, and they'd start stringing and snapping beans too, and you'd visit for a while, then they would leave, somebody else would come up. Yep. It was a great social time.
One other thing, I do have a photograph of the 1914 of the Riverview School out on the, and it has Earl Norris, not Earl, which one went to Kannapolis? Which one? Dan. Dale went to Kannapolis to teach. He's in that photograph, and I think it's your grandfather that was a teacher.
Yeah.
In that class, so, and I got it from, what's the boy's name?
Gary.
Not Gary. No, the one
Mickey?
One up here.
Dan.
Dan's the one that gave you that photograph, so it's available if you want to see it, and but we don't know who those people are. I only know about 2 or 3 of those students.
Yeah, I have that picture too. I guess Dan gave me one.
The other one, every student on it is identified on the 1917. And it's got my aunts on it and uncles. So it goes back pretty good ways. It was taken in 1970.
Uncle Dale was a real little boy. I don't know what age. Yeah.
1914, he was probably maybe 6 or less.
Maybe.
He was.
John, is that a printing press?
Yeah. That's Watauga Democrat used to be printing.
That's where they made their money.
Yeah, that was a printing press, and it actually worked. It took a long time, you had to put the letters in, and then you had to ink it and roll it through, and
My dad had one.
it would print a little bit. Yeah, I was editor of my own paper. And this train, my George and Roy and Clayton all worked in Detroit at one time. And I'm pretty sure, right, they got me that train one year and brought it home, and it had some track. And of course it's a wind-up train. And I got to play with it when they went back.
When your dad wasn't around, Jerry used to say at Christmas that he played with everybody's toys.
Oh, he enjoyed Christmas. He had a big time.
Is this what you call a typesetter?
Well, it's a press, and you set the type in it, for whatever you want to print.
And the type was backwards. You had to have a mirror to read it.
I don't know if your mom and Mom said when they were young, they'd all get together on Sundays and they'd go like to Longhook, they'd go up to Falls, they'd picnic, they'd walk. And she talked about walking from up on Mid-Camp to Trade to visit her uncle and back. And she said walking ain't crowded.
Yeah, but they would also go up into the town of Boone. You've seen those pictures where they had their pictures made on the steps of the old hotel.
Yeah, we got great pictures of our moms together.
Yeah. One other story. Phil's grandpa, John Castle, somehow decided that he would send off for equipment and all to become a dentist. And he was a community dentist. He,
Oh my God.
yeah, and he even made dentures.
Bought the stuff.
He bought the stuff and he fixed watches and dentisted. But anyway, back in the early 70s, my Aunt Belle Green still had dentures that she wore that Papa John Castle had made for her. But one of the funniest stories I ever heard about that was that somebody came to their house one night to Papa John's to get a tooth pulled. And Papa John just so happened to be in the bed sick. He wasn't able to do it. And so Fred, Madeline's daddy, was still living at home then, and the man begged him, he said, will you please pull this tooth? So Fred pulled the tooth, and the man came back the next day and said, Fred, you pulled the wrong tooth, will you pull this other one? But evidently back then, all you had to do was just send off for all the stuff, and you could be a dentist.
Weren't a little barbers dentists back then?
Maybe. That's why.
Dentistry, well, actually, I mean, that was a long time before medicine. It was probably in the 19th century that medicine actually became a profession.
Yeah.
Before then, it was very much you practice.
An art.
Medicine. It was more like a trade, and so yes, barbers were dentists.
Yeah.
Too.
Since you're talking about pulling a tooth or teeth, y'all know Jack Norris.
Yeah.
Jack one time, of course, he used to come up to the station. He pulled his own tooth one time. Of course, he probably wasn't feeling.
I was gonna say, he probably didn't feel a thing.
He didn't feel it, but he
He flew a plane down King Street one time.
Yeah, he flew a plane down King Street one time. Remember when he crash landed out?
Jack Norris.
Did he crash land right about where Basil Smith's
I
store
think
was?
he's
Right
in
there?
that tree. He
Yeah.
landed in that tree.
Probably a good thing he did, he couldn't find the field out there.
I met Jack when I first started working at Town Boone.
Yeah.
He's scary.
He's a good guy.
Yeah.
He's related to AC.
So folks, I've exhausted, I have some other stuff, but we've exhausted our time, and we'll actually wrap that up next week when we kind of talk about the program as a whole, talk about things we can learn from it, and reflect on that together next week. So thank you for sharing. Feel free to hang out. I, for one, am going to go check out the record players.
We didn't hear what these are.
And I still need somebody to work with the kids next week, so if you know if anybody can think of anybody. They want to know.
I'm sorry?
They want to know what they want to hear.
Barbara, is
Oh,
that
okay, please show and tell, Barbara.
Barbara, is that your kaleidoscope there? Yes. I had one just like that at Granny's. Never
Yeah,
knew
I
it
knew,
was.
just look, turn it, there's little pieces of, I don't know, color stuff, it's rock, I think, and it'll change, you can see, it'll change the pattern that's out in there. Yeah, and this is, I guess, a Christmas decoration that came from my aunt's. And if you lit the candles, they could go around. And it had two other little things like this to hit the chimes, but I don't know where they got to. I didn't yet think. And this little boy wants to see the train. Leroy had one of these. This is a lot better than this one. It's got the handle on it. But we have some pictures, and I think, I'm not sure this is the way, but you hold this up and look through it, and it looks three-dimensional. Yeah, you can pass it around.
That was pretty bad.
Anyway, this is a little doll that had little sticky clothes that you would put on it. This is one of my toys. And they clean, you can make different little like this. designs to put on the little post to it. And this is just a little music box. And a camera that, my first camera. And this was kind of popular back in our day too. This is a basketball one. You get these down and see. Shoot them and see if play out, how many got their outs first and all, or how many runs. And a fan that, this is pretty old, I'm sure. And this, I think I found it in some stuff that came from my aunts, and I suppose it's a baby rabbit. But this I wanted to show you because it had the box and the hat too. And I'm not sure exactly who this belonged to, but I guess when they dressed up in places.
They wear the hat to church.
Yeah.
Every Sunday.
And this I thought was kind of cute. It says on here, this is a souvenir, but it says, "Don't monkey with anything on my desk." And inside, you know, they used to write with the ink pens, and it's got felt, so I guess they use that to blot their ink with. And I have some pens over there, but we've got too many things yet. It's been long there.
Couple things, this is what you set plants out when it was wet, the ground was real, almost muddy. And this is what you set them out with when you had to water them. We like to do it better when it was wet. Let's have the whole water and
How'd that work?
it had a trigger in here, you put the water back here and you drop the plant here, and if you notice down here, you're gonna see it opens.
Open and water it.
And you heard that click, that's how much water it let go. It's not the click, it's the amount of water it lets go. But you had to hold it open to let the plant had to go down and stick that in the
Did you make
ground.
the hole with that?
Yes.
Okay.
You had to be pretty. I couldn't do that one.
And you get wet all over until the water goes down.
Right here, you see, you know what that is?
Pull it out for the
I'm pretty sure that's what Dad cranked his car with. Car crank or not?
That looks like, kinda like one.
Well, I think that's what it is, cause
No,
now that's what you cranked the car with back in the old days, so I'm pretty
Bill's
sure.
in a T model or A model?
Right.
It's neither one.
It's not.
What is it? It's neither one. It will be probably for a hit and miss engine.
Could have been, but I know we had some.
It'll be, for a stationary repair unit or one motor or something like that.
This right here, I don't know if you've seen one of these. I did not know till years after my dad had died. Does anyone recognize what that is?
It's a multimeter.
That was your meters on the car, in the dash.
It's a tube tester.
Oh.
And I didn't realize he went to radio school and actually fixed radios. And I bought the last stereo that used tubes in the last of Scott. And I found out and I took the sound thing up, the boom, that it might be worth $2,000. I said, wow. So I'm glad to take it. But anyway, this is a tube, and this is a new tube, and that's what I had left over from, so I could, if ever anything went wrong with my stereo, I could replace the tubes. Back in the old days, it didn't waste anything. Made a trim saw out of my sister's wheel bar. So he made two of these. And HC lost this when his horses ran off. I found it in my garden just a few years ago. And this is an old-timey hanger. It's got a metal thing here to open it up, and when you want to hang your pants up, it goes down and holds them tight. That's an old anyway, that's what I had. Anyone else have stuff?
I'll get a couple of these, yeah.